Hey friends, welcome back to another video. My name's Emma Lefave, and today we are doing something a little different. I have been itching to do more illustrative work, and I was playing around the other day and I did a little illustration of my son dancing, and I posted it on Instagram. People seem to really like it, and I thought, you know what, this is something I want to do, so why don't I do a tutorial video? And today is the first video of a quick little series of my process of painting this. So this is Miles in the Rain, and I show you how I sketch him and then how I paint it. So for today's video, we are starting off with a sketch. This is how I approach sketching things in general, from photos, reference photos, especially people. I will say I'm not good at faces, so as you can tell, his face isn't really in this, so that was strategic, but I do show you my process on how I kind of try and make sure things are in proportion and just, you know, sketch it out. So that's our first video today, and then later this week you will see the painting process. But for now, let's jump in and get started with our sketch. Okay friends, so today we're doing something very different. I recently was just painting for myself, and I did this little kind of illustration of my son dancing around. It was on Easter, and I just thought it was the cutest the way his body was moving, and so I just wanted to illustrate it for myself. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. And I posted it on my Instagram story, and a lot of people seem to really like it. So for today's video, I kind of just wanted to show you how I would go about painting and sketching out an illustration kind of like this, with this picture of my son in the rain the other day, which was so cute. And for this video, we're going to be just sketching. I'm going to give you kind of my drawing tutorial of how I approach drawing from a reference photo, especially a person, which can be very difficult. As you may notice, his face is not really in this photo. Same with these, because faces are hard, and I am not a person illustrator. But it's all still really cute, and I wanted to give you tips on how I approach it. I don't even know if this is the right way, because this is not what I usually do. And then in our next video, I'm going to show you how I would go about painting it, painting in the shadows, and all that. So for our sketching video today, I have my reference photo on my iPad. You don't need to put it on a digital medium like this, but I wanted to do this so I can show you kind of my thought process as how I look at an image and then transfer it on. If you are not a sketch kind of artist, and you feel more comfortable tracing an image, I mean, I've done that in the past too, so I can work on my watercoloring. I find that's fine too, especially if you take the photo. I think it's better. But today I'm going to show you kind of how I figure out proportions and all that. So I have it on my iPad. And then for the paper that I'm using today, I am using this Paul Rubens watercolor block. It's 100% cotton hot press paper. I like using it for just regular watercolor as well. Like my loose florals and all that stuff. I really enjoy the paper, and usually hot press paper it's very, very smooth. It's not textured at all. So it's not the best usually for, you know, a lot of different wet on wet techniques and all that. It's actually really good for illustration. But I find this paper is good for both. This one is really nice, but today I'm going to be using it because it is very smooth. So anytime I'm doing some sort of illustration, I like to use this paper. It's very smooth. Even colored pencils work really, really nicely on this, and then watercolor as well. So that's what I'm using today. And then I just have a regular pencil. This is my Craftimo pencil. It's a regular HB pencil. And then my must-have is my kneaded eraser. You can find these on Amazon. I think this is like a Faber-Castell one. I love it for stress and just for erasing. It's very nice. Okay, so let's get into drawing. So the first thing I like to do, I always like to start with the head. I don't know if this is the way that, you know, portrait artists usually do it. This is just how I've always done it. I am going to kind of put down the opacity of this just so I can draw over it with my Apple Pencil and show you how I kind of visualize these things. Okay, so let's just make sure I have a decent sized pencil. Okay, so usually I look for the head shape, and obviously this is kind of a cone shape, so I try and look for regular old shapes first. So what I usually do, hold on. What I usually do is I will draw a circle with the most circular part of the head. And I'll just tap it to make it a perfect circle. Like that. And I'm just gonna move it. Okay, so I find a circle. Obviously, the head shape isn't really circular, but then I try and go off of this guide. So I'm gonna draw a circle here. This is just the way I do it. This is just the way it helps me. And I am gonna draw it darker than I normally would. I would definitely suggest going a lot lighter with your pencils so you're not making it super, super dark, because then it's easier to erase. And then, so I have my circle, and then I try and look at the shapes kind of around it and the proportions around that shape to see where I need to go. So I see that right above this circle, I have this little kind of slight kind of cone shape of where the hood peaks. So I know to put that there. And then it kind of comes sloping down. And see at the bottom of the circle, that's kind of where the hood ends. So I know that this slope kind of needs to end where the bottom of the circle does. And then it kind of comes down like this. And there's like a little bit of a opening here to where his face is. And this kind of comes behind like that. And then I see kind of like this rectangular, like I just try and look for shapes, okay? Just try and imagine some shapes just to give myself an idea of how much space I need for things. So I see this like rectangle shape here, and it just working off of shapes really kind of helps me. I know it looks weird and crazy, but this is just how I do it, and it kind of works for me. So I know it's going to kind of come back over here. And then when it comes down, it starts to go out. Okay. He also has another little hood in here. So I also try, when I'm looking at proportions, I try and compare sizes of things. So the width of this, I can see is kind of like, see here? Would be about that much of the circle. So it's not quite this the center, but it's just like less than half. So I just kind of look at proportional shapes, see where it ends in comparison to this rectangle. The hood kind of comes down. Okay, and then his face here is a little bit tricky. But I'm just trying to look at the shape. So there's like a tiny little sliver of the front of his face. And it comes down, not halfway. You know, I try and break things up into, like, not shapes. Sorry, I'm trying to explain this and it's so hard. So here I'll have this area when I'm trying to look at where his face starts, and then I'll break it in half and then kind of measure, okay, that's kind of right atop where his eye is, and that's where the little curve is. So I'll break this up right in half, and I know that his eye is going to be right here, and then the top of his forehead kind of comes down, and that's where that little dip is. I'm really hoping this works out, because if it doesn't, that I'm teaching you my ways for nothing. Okay. Okay, there's his little dip and then his little cute nose. I'm not good at drawing faces, so I thought this would be the best way to do it. Just a little glimpse of his face. And then a little cheek kind of here. And then just the top of his mouth, and then the jacket literally comes right up in front. So we can kind of cut back and then meet this part back here. Okay, and that's gonna fade into there. So right now, it looks weird, right? Looks totally weird. You're like, all these shapes, and it almost looks like a robot. It's kind of funny looking, but this is how I approach it. So I'm gonna keep going and just showing you hopefully this is interesting and it makes sense. I do a lot of erasing. A lot of the time it's not perfect at all. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, and that's totally normal. Okay, just try and do your best, but don't expect perfection. Okay, so I'm just gonna try and get this little part, and then we're gonna do the body. Okay. Okay, so the body. I'm gonna kind of go off the shoulder here. I see that it's a little bit of a slope. Again, I'm looking at where the top of his shoulder meets maybe a different part over here, so it's in line with his nose. So I know that the shoulder is gonna end right here in line with his nose. There's a little seam there. And then this jacket kind of comes in and then out. And then for the size of the jacket, again, I'll look at how tall from maybe the shoulder to the bottom of the jacket, how much space we have in proportion to where his head is. So from the shoulder to here. So I'll go like this, and then kind of give myself an idea of how big I need that. So if I were to go, so hold on. Like, hold on, let's go like this. And then it's just like, almost like another head over here. So I'm gonna measure that from the shoulder, and it's gonna be about that long. Kind of gives me an idea. You can even bust out a ruler. That would work too. There's no shame in, you know, measuring things out to get proper proportions. I don't know how a lot of artists do it just like looking at things. I really don't. Okay, so here's his jacket. Okay, I'm gonna bring the arm down, and then his hand kind of comes just above. So there's like a little seam here, and his little fingers kind of come down here. I'll do that on detail in a second. The sleeve. There's a slight bend in his arm, so that needs to come forward a bit. And this is how I approach doing this. So I hope this is helpful. I'm not stopping my direction or anything. I'm just kind of touch and base, making sure you know that I don't completely know what I'm doing, but I'm trying. Okay. A little finger, whoop. I also find it's really hard to draw kids without making, like, their proportions are just so different compared to adults. Their bodies are stubbier. Everything is just shorter and kind of rounder. And I feel like I grew up drawing mostly normal, larger size people, not kids necessarily. And this is a little bit tricky. So trying to figure this out is difficult. And even with this painting that I did here, like, I love this one. I find that looks in proportion, but I feel like he looks a little too long in these. He's a little too tall. His legs should be a little bit shorter and stubbier, but like that is so Miles right here, this one. But the other ones I feel like could use a little bit of work. So just know that it's not always going to work out. Okay, and then the sleeve. So when we get into the painting section in the next video, I'm going to show you how I kind of go about shading and stuff like that, because the wrinkles in the jacket and like any kind of fabrics is what makes something look a little bit more realistic. So again, I'm trying to look for shapes. So I see, oops, why is it gray? I changed the color. Here we go. Okay, so here's the arm, right? Let's just kind of go like this. And then I try and look for shapes. That's in the dark. That's in the dark. Here's another dark area here. Another dark area here. And it just kind of gives me an idea of where I'm going to put my shadows. And we can even put that in there now if you wanted. Just kind of drawing some of those shapes. And so when we start painting, I'll erase these so they're not as prominent. But looking for those shapes will also help kind of do these little areas. And then usually right where you have a shadow, so these would be shadowed areas, you're going to put a highlight right around it. So I'm just going to kind of like that. Okay? Okay, so the jacket's pretty decent. Now for the legs. I got to make sure that with his legs I don't go too long. This is looking a little weird and robotic. We can even, if you want to, erase your shapes like that, just to kind of get a better idea of what it looks like. Okay, so now for the feet and the boots. So again, I'm looking at the base of the jacket to see where things start. So I like to just break it up in halves like that. And I see that the pant leg is kind of starting just behind this line. Okay. And then the knee is going to hit there. So let's break it up right in half. Starts right behind here. Kind of does a little thing. And then the knee is going to be coming down this way. So I know to make it a lot smaller. I feel like if I didn't do this, I'd probably be making the leg a lot bigger than it is. And when you're drawing kids, you got to make sure that they're not that big. Okay, and he has these little, he's wearing his jammies in this picture. Went for a rain walk in our jammies. Like that, his boot. And then his other leg is just right behind it. Okay, and then the shape of the boot. Trying not to make it too big. Kind of looking here. So if I go from the knee to the ankle, I know that it's kind of just a little bit more. I feel like actually the leg needs to be a bit longer. Okay, if I'm cutting the boot, this needs to be a little bit longer. The boot part is a little bit shorter. And then you go swoop down. Oops. And then again, if you're having trouble with the proportions of this, measure it out, compare it to other parts, because boots and like shoes can be a little bit tricky. You don't want to make it too big or too small. That might be a little bit too big. I have to kind of take a look at it in a second. It looks bigger in the photo, so like that. The other boot comes, he has this little handle here. I feel like that needs to be up a bit more of an angle. Yeah, there's not as much of an angle. See, I'm kind of comparing photos. There's not as much of an angle with this knee. So I need to bring it back just a little bit. So again, let's take a look. I have to here, the back of the ankle kind of has to be in line. Like that. There we go. And just these little things that you kind of notice will help with your adjustments. All right. There we go. There's this leg here. And then this ends right there. And you see a little bit of his other boot like that. Okay. And then we can do any kind of details after. Okay, so I think I have my sketch. And now is where I am going to do any kind of just erasing of lines. Now, you also want to decide how you want to go about your sketch. Do you want some of these lines showing through, which is totally fine? Do you want to do kind of a line and wash with a pen? I think I'm going to do it with watercolor first. So what I would do is kind of roll my kneaded eraser over top to lighten it all so it's not so dark. And then once I'm done the whole painting in our next video, I am going to decide if I want to add some line, like some ink to it. But if I have a little bit of pencil underneath, then that's totally fine. So that's about it. I'm going to go over this really quickly and just kind of fine-tune things. But that's our video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and make sure to come back to our next video on Wednesday for the actual painting part of this tutorial. All right. Thank you so much for watching my video. I really hope you liked it, and I hope you learned something, and I will see you next time for our part 2. Have a great day, guys. Bye.